Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to explore the topic of discovery and its process in charting a course to meaningful employment. Today is what we would call an informational session, in the sense that this will run for about an hour, and it's designed to give you some background information into different aspects of discovery, customized employment, the different disability employment systems, how it's funded, and what good training looks like, etc. So let's get going. Right, what is discovery? Well, it is, obviously, as you would know, is the underlying process that sits at the beginning of customized employment. And you can see there on the little graphic on the side there where it is 4 stages in real terms. Sometimes it's classified as 3, but we like to use 4 because it adds a little bit more to it. So it's a process that starts in the home. It's a process that is about the job seeker. It's about their family, about their friends, and about their social capital. But we'll go a little bit deeper into that as we go on. So in the US, it's recognized as a psychosocial rehabilitation process that looks at the strengths, interests, and skills and supports around a person, and it's been defined in law since 2014 through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, which really brought a focus to disability employment, and of course it placed discovery in the legislation, which meant that service providers in the US that wanted to deliver disability employment had to use discovery, which is great. How long does it take? Well, this is a really interesting one. On average, 24 to 60 hours. It can be longer. It can go out to 80 plus hours, depending on the complexity and the nature of the disability, the environment, the opportunities in that environment. But it isn't a quick process. So it isn't a time-limited process. It's a time-intensive process. It's a skill-intensive process. It's really not for people that are looking for employment in a hurry. If you think about it, it came out of rural America, and it was designed as a process to find employment for people that were generally considered unemployable, such as people with a disability, people in regional communities with not a lot of skills. It's one of the funny things that I often hear is that, oh, you can't use this in country areas. It's like, well, yeah, you can. You can use it anywhere. It just means that the process will look a little different. That's why it's called customized employment. It looks a little different. In real terms, there are 3 different types of discovery: individual discovery, self-guided discovery, and group-guided discovery. And we'll dig a little bit deeper into what they look like a little bit further on in this presentation. So what is discovery? From our perspective, it's a capacity building process with employment as the outcome. And I think it needs to be recognized that it does build a person's capacity. I mean, if you think about it, some of the underpinning activities such as informational interviews and work experiences, we know build skills. That builds a person's capacity for employment. So it is a capacity building process first and foremost, with a focus on employment. And it is, as it says there, it's a person-centered process. It's embedded in person-centeredness. It is all about the person. It is always about the person, and this is why it's called customized employment, it's also about mutuality. And mutuality is about a benefit for the person and a benefit for the employer. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve employer problems by supporting the right person into the right job that creates meaningful employment. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, the process itself is quite well defined. There are 12, I think 13, recognized characteristics for discovery, starting from meeting the job seeker in their home, their family, their friends, their extended family, to develop a deeper understanding. Discovery activities, which are around assessing strengths, skills, interests, career exploration, and customized employment planning. If you think about that for a second, I mean, it's not an assessment in the traditional sense that, oh, you get an assessment and you pass or fail, or you get a number or something like that. No, discovery doesn't do that. I've had people over the years ask me, what happens if I fail discovery? Well, you can't fail discovery. Discovery is a process that explores the individual. I mean, it's about taking the things that people like and seeing what's of interest stem from those things, those likes, and then looking at the skills they have and the capacity to build more skills, and of course the supports they have around them. So it's not a pass or fail. You'll never fail discovery. The simple reality is discovery by itself is not an assessment in the stricter sense. It is simply about learning about the person. It's really that simple, but it's actually quite complex. So let's look at the 4 different types of discovery. Most people would be aware of the term discovery and normal discovery. I guess normal, or discovery that most people see. That's why I call it normal. But you have self-guided discovery, you have group-guided discovery, and I guess it raises the question, which one should I use? Well, it's really quite simple, in the sense that most people work their way through normal discovery, and just normal discovery is generally consultant or family-led discovery, in the sense that you have a person that has comprehensive training who is leading the process and supporting the client on that journey towards employment, who are conducting the discovery with the client and helping the client build their capacity. Self-guided discovery isn't that much different from normal guided discovery, in the sense that in self-guided discovery, the professional has a smaller role in that they're there to guide and provide mentoring, and usually what's happening in self-guided discovery is the individual or their family are actually undertaking the process with support from a trained discovery customized employment professional. Group-guided discovery, of course, as it says, it's group-guided, and this is the delivery of discovery in group settings. You could almost call them workshop settings or peer settings. In the settings where I've delivered group-guided discovery, there's usually been about 12 to 15 people in the room, and we're building peer networks. And the beautiful thing about group-guided discovery, from my perspective, is often most of us will sit there and we're not sure how to describe, the strengths we have, whether we have any strengths. And in group-guided discovery, you work with your peers, and they see things that you don't. And in that sense, you could argue that in individual discovery, you've got one person, a consultant, working with you. But in group-guided discovery, you've got a whole lot of people working with you, supporting you, building a peer network to support you away from it. When do you use them? Well, it depends on the setting. Group-guided discovery is often used in the justice system. It actually is the underpinning practice for our school program, Glide-In, that we use in schools here in Melbourne, and some of our colleagues are using our program in different parts of Australia. But it's in some ways, discovery is about the setting as well, and the people that are in the setting, and the sort of support you have, that dictates the type of discovery you have. But what I would simply say is that the bulk of people have generally a professionally guided discovery process. What I tend to see self-guided discovery is usually with advocacy groups where they're really just supporting people as part of their larger advocacy portfolio, and they generally tend to have kind of information sessions and support people that are on their way with little bits and pieces of information. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of what it is in that sense. You've got discovery, self-guided, which is minimally guided discovery, and group-guided discovery. And it's up to you to have a look at them. And if you're not sure which one is the right one, talk to a discovery professional. Okay, get some advice. Have a look at some material online. All right. Okay, so let's move on. So, customized employment. what is customized employment? Well, based on the previous slide, you might think that customized employment is simply discovery. Well, it's not. Customized employment, and particularly the processes themselves, there are two levels. You have what we would call, I guess, the basic level, which can have a focus on customized employment, and it is 40 competencies or skills and knowledge sets supported by 127 different individual practices, activities. So it's quite a comprehensive knowledge and skill base that's required to deliver discovery with a focus on customized employment. Requires 40 hours of training and a minimum of 12 hours of practice. That is the recognised standard. It's not something that was made up. It is the standard for proper discovery customized employment training. Now, there is another level above this, which is the full professional customized employment competency program, and that's bigger. That is 120 hours of training. So it's a more comprehensive program. Which one would you use? Most people, and I would say 90% of people that deliver customized employment have done discovery training and probably job development training. And if you're a real specialist in the field, you probably would have done employment counselling training. So you would have done probably somewhere in the order of, oddly enough, close to 100 hours of training. But they're complementary skill sets. Now, the full professional program, which is 120 hours, like I said, only probably about 1 in 10 people undertake that, and that's fine because you generally tend to find people that are undertaking that are the head people in organisations or in their employment programs or the trainers and that sort of stuff. It requires ongoing mentoring and technical support. Why? It's because evidence evolves, practices change, policy and legislation changes. So it's not simply a set and forget, and it's certainly not an adjunct to other things you're doing. It is a standalone professional service, and it needs to be treated like that. We know from our experience here in Australia in the last 15 odd years that we've been training people in Australia, and certainly from the overseas colleagues that we work with. Without the ongoing mentoring and technical support, without treating it as a specialist program, it fails in most organisations. It is simple as that. It's simply because, in a way, people don't view it right. Providers don't look at it correctly. They don't invest in it correctly, and they don't see it for what it is. It's not something you do as a part-time thing. You can see, the 40 hours of training, the 40 competencies, the 127 underpinning practices. This is a big piece of work. So you can't learn this in 2 hours. And what I will say to you is that the other thing that pops out of this is that we know that 12 months of practice is about 5 discoveries for most people, 5 or 6 discoveries, probably more. But we know that it takes 5 to 6 discoveries before all the light bulbs go on, and you start to feel comfortable delivering discovery and customised employment. It is not something that you should rush through, and it's certainly not something you should rush your learning through as well. Okay, so where to? This is an interesting slide because this is where we'll just talk about the difference between the different employment processes, systems we have in Australia. We have the Disability Employment Service, or DES, Australian Disability Enterprise, or ADE, and the NDIS Open Employment Program. Generally in discussions people talk about either ADE or DES, but the reality is that the NDIS as a organisation or as a system, whichever way you want to describe it, has actually been fostering the development of an open employment system, which is generally based on customised employment discovery. That is not the DES, it's not an ADE, it's a third arm or a third leg of employment. Let's have a look. Now, DES, or the Disability Employment Service, it's mainstream disability employment supports delivered through about 89 service providers, supporting on average about 250,000, as many as 300. And I think I've seen someone quote a figure of 334 at one point, individuals. On average, they place 15% of their participants annually, can be a little higher, but it's generally in that 15 to 20% area. So about 1 in 5 people that use the DES system are placed in employment. There are 2 arms to it: disability management, which is more of a rehabilitation, non-lifelong disability, and the ESS, Employment Support Service, which is for people with lifelong disability. Okay. ADEs, which are, of course, actually I might just come back. That little slide there, the primary disabilities of DES participants, you can see that by and large it supports people with physical and psychiatric disability. I think the most recent figures suggest that more than 50% of DES participants have some type of psychiatric or mental illness, which means that in that sense their client base isn't that dissimilar to the mainstream Workforce Australia program for people that supposedly don't have a disability. So you can see that if you look at the idea of what most people consider or their experience of disability, which is intellectual, autism, neurological, etc., that sort of thing, cerebral palsy, etc., it's only the small cohort of people that within a DES system. Okay, I'll come back to ADEs now. Disability enterprises, they had their origins in sheltered employment in the mid-last century, where they were established by families on the main to provide environments where their children could learn employment skills, employability skills, in a softer environment before potentially exploring employment in the mainstream employment space. In 1986, when the Disability Services Act came into being, they started to change into Australian Disability Enterprises. Did that change much? Not really. It changed their focus a little bit more commercial, a little bit more external funding, etc. And of course, in recent years, they've morphed under the guise of the NDIS into social enterprises, and often some are now calling themselves supported employment settings. Supported employment is what they call open employment in the US. In Australia, it was always the term used for segregated employment. Supported employment has about 16,000 participants in Australia, and about 1% annually move into open employment. They use the supported wage system, which is an award that allows wages to be based on productivity for people within ADEs. And in general, the wages are between $4 to $10 an hour. Some are higher, some a little bit less. The comparison, of course, is that the minimum wage in Australia now is around about $23 an hour. So you can see that the wages are really not the primary driver for many people that are in ADEs. Of course, the third item is the NDIS employment supports, which is capacity building using core and capacity building line items. The key here is to ensure that employment is the goal of your program, and that the funding will always align with the goal, not the category that you find it in. And that's important to remember. NDIS funding follows the goal and not the category where the money sits. Okay, some people sort of go, well, you can't use this for employment. The reality is, if employment is a goal, then you can have a wider spread of funds available to you within your plan. Okay, a little graph at the top, which is the taken from the recent presentation regarding to the school leaver employment support, which is now youth assistance, or will be called youth assistance. And you can see they've done a very good job of I guess, categorizing the participants within the NDIS, and that you have people that are either working age, which is generally anybody over the age of 14, I think, is a working age. But generally we find kids from about 13 upwards that are in the schools start to think about employment. And you can see there it's about skill building, it's about experiencing employment, etc. Young people in the transition phase, different thing of course, and that's again it's just the next step into adulthood. And you can see they've categorized 20 to 24 people with minimal work experience that have where their disability produces functional impacts across a range of domains. And of course, young people that are transitioning from school to tertiary education or other training who are looking to obtain a qualification, a trade qualification or something along those lines. So you can see that the NDIS fund employment across a broad range of age and categories. So that's really, really important, because it does give you more opportunity to work with a broad spectrum of people. I will say to you that in our Work First Disability Employment Program, we've had people as young as 13 start with us, and that's about building their capacity and exploring employment so that when they do get to the end of school, they have a solid blueprint for employment. But importantly, what it does is it helps illustrate to families that their child can have a normal life with a normal job in the community and have all the opportunities that are afforded to everybody else. It's really as simple as that. Okay, so they're the three potential pathways that we have that you can use. Mainstream employment services through the DARES, ADEs, if you're looking for something that's a little bit, I guess, I'm not sure what the correct word is, I'd use placid, I guess, and the NDIS if you're looking at pursuing open employment and using NDIS as your main funding tool. Okay, so discovery and creating employment. If you look at it, and I think this is one of the things that we've always considered, discovery for us is a capacity building framework with employment as the outcome. And why capacity building? Well, we know through work experiences, we know through engaging with employers that young people, old people, everybody build skills. So that's your building your capacity for employment, for a particular type of employment or pathway. It's based on refining likes to interests to vocational themes. And if you think of that and think, okay, likes and interests, aren't they the same thing? Well, no, they're not. Likes are the things that we do, and an example would be, we all like to sit and watch the footy. We probably sit there with a drink and maybe a bag of chips, and we like doing that. But do we want to work in a Coke factory or a chip factory? You might say yes to that. But the novelty wears off pretty quickly because it's not, it's a bit like, I think from memory, when you work for some of the big chocolate manufacturers, you're able to eat the product. And some people would think, oh, wow, I can eat chocolate for life. But most people that work in a chocolate factory, they get very sick of chocolate very quickly. And it's no longer, in some ways, it's like, oh, I don't like chocolate anymore. But, what we're trying to do is we want to separate the likes into the interests, because what are interests? Interests are the things that will get us out of bed, right? And the interests are the things that, like I said, they get us out of bed, take us somewhere. And that's what we want to explore and build on, because that leads to potential vocational pathways or vocational themes. Because what are we trying to do? Well, we've gone from the things we like to the things that interest us, that get us out of bed and get us excited, to vocational themes. And the vocational themes here is not simply about going, oh, I want to be a pilot. That's not a vocational theme, that's an occupational theme. A vocational theme around a pilot would be probably transport. Okay, and if you think about vocational themes, like I said, they're not an occupation, they're a big picture. And if you think about transport, per se, as you think, oh, okay, I want to be a pilot, okay, but a vocational theme might be transport. Well, transport has planes, trains, buses, cars, trucks, boats, and everything associated with those particular transport modes. And then if you start looking at it like that, you're talking thousands of potential jobs that are aligned to that one theme. Right? One theme. You've got thousands. And if you think again, extend that further, in the methodology, we're talking about trying to develop 3 vocational themes. And if you start to develop 3 vocational themes, you end up with thousands of potential occupations and places that work together, that provide multiple opportunities. So we never think in terms of jobs. We're trying to get to a vocational theme, and that vocational theme opens up a world of opportunity. One of the models of disability is Sen's capability model. And I like that because it talks about opportunity. And the real barrier for many people is the lack of opportunity. And our vocational theme, opening up thousands of opportunities, is brilliant because guess what? We're working towards your capabilities, your potential. All right? You look at work experience. Multiple levels of work experience exist in discovery, and that's not simply, we do that to work out what a vocational theme is. We can use work experience and informational interviews to separate your likes and interests. We can use it to build social capital in the community, and we use it during job development as well, because work experience is a live job interview. And in some ways you could extend informational interviews, the process of engaging with employers and looking for opportunities. You can also use that as potential lead into work experience. So multiple levels of work experience are really the key. And we know in our schools program, for instance, and even for the young people that are not in school, what we try to do with the work experience is we use it, yes, to help isolate interests and vocational things, but we also use it to build capacity. And as we're building capacity, those work experiences, we like them to get a little bit more complex all the time, because we're starting to build a complex skill set, which really is about building employability. All right? And because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to give an employer a reason to employ you. There's no reason to employ anybody unless they have skills that can be exploited for profit. And that might sound harsh, but guess where your wages come from? They come from the profit. Okay? So as harsh as that sounds, by doing this, by engaging with things, by engaging with employers, by engaging with work experience, what we're doing is giving an opportunity for an employer to look and go, I want that person working for me. I'm prepared to give them an opportunity. Okay, so it goes on for quite a while. We find that most of the employment opportunities that come to the clients for our Work First program, for instance, come through work experiences, and that's simply because employers had the opportunity to see someone in their workplace. Okay, now one thing to remember about discovery is it's not about knocking on doors, handing in resumes and doing online job applications. The client is in the community, the jobs are in the community, employers are in the community. So why are you sitting in an office banging away on something online? Most jobs come through small and medium business, and they're in the community. We recently had a situation where a very significant national employer that has all these awards for employability, and disability friendly and this sort of stuff. And there was a client wanted to work with them, and we were told all the way up to their state office, you have to use our online system. And the online system is not disability friendly. Right? So we tend to not bother. Yes, we will if a client is looking for something at that level, but most jobs are in the community, and you find them by talking, because we know that 80% of vacancies are not advertised. Okay, I know, for instance, us, in our employment processes for our own staff, most of the jobs, the people we employ, come from someone we know or someone one of our staff members knows. Doing the work, so I just want to circle back to that handing in resumes things. If you have a family that wants you wants to know how many resumes and how many employers you're going to go and see and hand out this week, you should have a good conversation with them, because this is not a numbers game. In the sense that, yes, you talk to employers, but it's not a percentage game. It's not about having, sending out 100 resumes and knocking on 100 employer doors, because guess what? Every other type of service provision and every other service provider is doing the same thing. So you're up against 500, 600, 700 potential other people that want that one job. You're not going to get it by banging on doors. All right. So if a family wants you to bang on doors and hand out resumes, think about that, because that's not discovery. Okay, maybe they're looking for a service that is quick to place, and that's probably the mainstream employment services. Okay, so just be wary of the fact that this is not a quick process. It's a time-intense process. It's a person-intense process. It's a person-centered process. And as it says there, it's about social capital. It's about exploring it, building it, and spending it. We only get that by engaging with family, friends, and the community, by going out there, engaging, talking, handing in resumes and going, do you have any vacancies? Here's a resume. I have someone that's interested. It's not going to get you anywhere. Okay, so it's really that more extensive person-centered process, and that is not banging on doors, handing in resumes by the truckload. Okay. So, maintaining fidelity and authenticity in practice. Now, obviously the first way to maintain fidelity and authenticity in discovery is to have a comprehensive knowledge base, and that is time intensive. You know, there are no shortcuts. The reality is that our friends at Griffin Hamer's developed the Discovery Fidelity Scale, and we've just about finished the Australian adaptation of that, which is about making sure that people don't take shortcuts. You know, if you take a shortcut in any process breaks, it fails. And often that's what we've seen in a lot of programs over the years, whether it be person-centered practice or active support or anything. You know, people will take shortcuts, process fails, and they go, well, this doesn't work. It's a useless process. Well, the process does work. There's bucket loads of evidence to show that it works, but you need to be properly trained and you need to be authentic to the process. Don't take shortcuts. If you want a shortcut, go somewhere else, right? Importantly, you need to measure progress towards employment, right? And the process, the fidelity scale, to make sure that you're delivering what you should be delivering. Progress is an interesting one, because particularly for clients in the NDIS, one of the things the government wants to see is in their reporting is progress. You need to be able to show progress. How do you do that? Well, in employment, we've developed an outcome measure, which is designed to measure the impact of employment on a person. So in that sense, it's an endpoint. What we have done, looking at it closely, talking to people in the community, and looking at what the government requires, is we've just developed a pre-employment version of that, which provides a measure of progress. And we're testing that at the moment, doing field validity tests to see if it makes sense, if the questions make sense, before we move on to an empirical trial of it to produce the evidence for it. And that's about illustrating real progress. So it's important that you do measure progress, the client progress, and put that in your reports so that the agency can see that you are investing their money wisely. Okay? Remember, discovery and customized employment in particular, it's a capacity building process for long-term meaningful employment. Right? It's a path that opens doors. It's a path that supports you in the sense that it's a journey towards that door. It'll open that door and it'll take you inside and get you to feel comfortable and warm for the long term. That's what it is. Okay, so really important. Okay, you have to maintain fidelity. You have to maintain authenticity, and you can only do that by undertaking intensive training. Information sessions, which I said we tend to see through advocacy groups, are fine, but they know it's not going to help you long term. Yes, it will give you a basic knowledge, but the real practice, as I've said, you can see there are standards, and if you're going to do it properly, you really need to meet those standards. So, let's talk about the NDIS and employment. The NDIS gives you a number of categories, mostly in the capacity building area and through finding and keeping a job, which has 3 categories within it, and capacity building around improved learning and improved daily living. Now, if you look at the finding and keeping a job, employment-related assessment, counselling and advice, this is the process of employment counselling. All of the staff that we employ in our employment program are qualified counsellors or psychologists. We take a different approach in the sense that because it is capacity building and because many of the clients have some form of mental illness, whether that be mild or severe, they need support, to build their capacity to exist in a workplace. It's really important. One of the things that the NDIS doesn't do and should do is it should also provide counselling to families around employment. We tend to find a lot of families have significant anxiety around their child going off to employment by themselves. But that's a separate discussion, and I think it's worth having that discussion when you're working with families to see if they need other supports. But you can see there, employment-related counselling assessment, workplace assistance, and of course the youth employment, which is the replacement for the school leaver employment support program. So one of the things that we've come across over the years is that a number of organisations, many advocacy groups have taken the view that there are two things. The NDIS doesn't fund discovery or customised employment, and there's no training available for it. Now, both of those things are absolute furphies. If you understand discovery and customised employment, you'll see that it's always funded it. Even before it put discovery as a line item or it mentioned it in the finding and keeping a job area, it's always funded it. You just needed to understand customised employment discovery and delivered it correctly. If you understand it, you can find the line items that make sense because, as you can see there, it is a capacity building process. Okay. Now, I'll come to the employment in a minute about proper training. So you can see the NDIS does fund it. There are some line items in core you can use if you have the appropriate qualifications, and that's the important thing about it. Many of the line items that exist for employment are based on the support worker model, and of course employment is not a support worker job, it's a highly professional job, a highly skilled job. You can see that looking at the standards they impose in the US and the standards that we should follow here in Australia. If you start there, you will find what you need to fund the journey. The important thing is to plan it properly and understand what you're trying to achieve against that employment goal and what, in many ways, what are the deficits you're trying to build? What are the strengths that you're trying to build? And look at it from that perspective, and then you won't go too far wrong. Okay. Right. This is the interesting one: comprehensive training and support. You tend to find, as I said, two types in Australia. One is informational, which is short, 1 or 2 hour informational type. Sometimes they go half a day, sometimes a little longer, and it's generally ideal for families and advocates because it's not giving you the full picture. It allows you to engage in the process in an informed way, to have discussions with professionals. What's interesting about that is that we tend to see that families that are looking at pursuing self-employment or some type of part-time employment for their kids generally tend to stick to the informational type and the short 2 hour informational type sessions to give them enough information to pursue what they want, and that's fine. If that's what you need. Comprehensive training, of course, meets the US legal definitions and accreditation standards that exist for discovery and customised employment, which are defined in the US by the professional bodies that manage customised employment and discovery. Now, it's designed for families and professionals who want to undertake or deliver discovery and customised employment with fidelity to the evidence and to the recognised standards. Excuse me. Now, we do informational because clearly that's what this is. This is an informational session. But we also deliver comprehensive training. We have done for the past 15 years around Australia and overseas to service providers, to professionals, and of course to a number of individuals. We have quite a number of individuals and families that undertake comprehensive training. Comprehensive training falls into two categories, like I said. You've got discovery, or the discovery professional, which is the 40-hour program. And then, of course, you've got the complete professional customised employment program, which is 120 hours of training and another year or so of practice. You need to have done a year or so of practice to actually do that particular course. But that program, along with the discovery program, meets the requirements for to allow you to sit an exam and be certified in the States as a certified employment support professional. I have that qualification. When I sat the exam many years ago, it was 133 questions over 3 hours. Fascinating journey, but it's an illustration that this is a profession. It's not a hobby. It's not something you can pick up by watching a few videos. It's not something you can pick up by reading a few books, and I recommend you read the books. But you need more than that. It's really that simple. So, some final thoughts. Customized employment, underpinned by comprehensive training, mentoring, and adherence to standards of practice fidelity, has the capacity to deliver meaningful employment outcomes that are sustainable, long-term, whether it be employer-based employment or self-employment. Now, just think about self-employment. There's nothing wrong with self-employment. Self-employment in its sense is the truest accommodation that you can get. And I will say to you, when I started the centre 15 odd years ago, it's an accommodation for me. I can't work in offices through reasons I'm not going to discuss, through my disability, to be honest. I can't work in offices. Can't survive in them. When I've tried, I've usually been carted out. But the reality is self-employment is the purest accommodation that you can get. For most people, as a matter of fact, everybody has accommodations in their life. I mean, this is a smartphone. A smartphone is an accommodation, right? If you think about it, right? The beauty thing about accommodations is they lift a person's productivity and capacity. We know you put accommodations in a mainstream workplace when you employ people with disability, you can improve the productivity by 20, 30%. I mean, simply by having accommodations. And those accommodations you generally find also support people without a disability to be better and more productive. Okay. Important thing is, if you're going to do this and you're going to do it properly, commit to investing in yourself, in training. Do it properly. Don't take any shortcuts. Right? Discovery isn't an add-on to another program or another service. It is a standalone service by itself. Okay, that's important to recognize. It is a standalone service by itself. Okay, now if I circle back right to the beginning and I mentioned group discovery. Group guided discovery works in the disability employment system in the services where I've used it because it's, as I said earlier on, it creates a peer mentoring program. Now, Des is okay of getting groups of people together. He can do that within its remit. And group-guided discovery, which creates peer networks of people supporting each other, works very well. So if you look at it from that point of view, you start to see these are quite complex processes that are quite nuanced, that require comprehensive training. If you're going to do this, get the training. Invest in the knowledge and skills to do it properly. Don't take shortcuts. Otherwise, you'll be sitting here in 6 months' time going, well, this was a waste of time. It did not work. Well, it does work. There's over 25 years of evolving evidence. And that 25 years is simply from, I say only 25 years, but 25 years is when the term discovery and customized employment were coined back in 2000. Before that, there's another 20 odd years, maybe closer to 30 odd years of person-centered practice and people wandering around, pulling the evidence together, doing research and practice and going, this works, that doesn't work, let's evolve this, go a little bit further to build a comprehensive program. And that's why in 2000, when the Office of Disability Employment Policy, which sits under the Department of Labor in the US, brought a whole bunch of experts together to go, what are you all doing? And guess what? They discovered they were pretty much doing the same thing. And that was the origins of the formal version of discovery and customized employment. But it has a long history before that. But like everything, when you start evolving a methodology, it kind of doesn't really have a clear vision. But by 2000, we had a clear vision. And I can tell you in 2024, the vision is really clear. So invest in the process, invest in yourself, take the time to do it properly. Don't rush through it, okay? You rush through it, you'll miss things, you'll fail. Like I always say, customized employment is very nuanced. Everybody gets their own version of discovery. Why their own version of it? We have a framework, a practice model, but we're all individuals. We all live in different settings with different opportunities, with different supports. We have different disabilities. No one has the same disability. You might have the same diagnosis, but you have your version of that. All right, so it's customized to the individual. Keep that in mind, okay? It's not a cookie cutter. It's a framework that allows you to contextualize it to your setting, to your client, to everything that's going on, all right? And that's that social capital piece in some ways, okay? So that's all I wanted to say today in this. To help you, if you go to the link for training and knowledge resources, that'll take you to the CDERP store, and in the CDERP store you'll find a whole bunch of training and free resources if you want that you can download. There's a toolkit you can download that'll help you acquire some more knowledge. If you need formal training, talk to us. The training we deliver is mapped to the US competencies and sits quite comfortably there. And how do I mean, I've done all that work mapping it, and I will say to you that the initial impetus for our training was modelled on the Griffin Hamus training. The people that guided me, Carrie's been very generous to me over the years and has guided me, and we've modelled our work on theirs, and we've done that simply because we needed to do some contextualisation to Australia. It's as simple as that. Have a look at our Work First Employment program, which gives you a bit more of an idea of what the different ways of doing employment looks like. And of course, our main site, the CDERP website, has a link to everything from the training to the employment to research, you name it. You'll find everything you need there. So if you want to know a little bit more, by all means, email me. If you just put info in front of CDERP, that'll reach me. You can ring our phone number from our main site, and that'll reach me. Email me, phone me. More than happy to have a conversation and about any aspect of what we've discussed today. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll leave it there. If you do have any questions, like I said, email me or phone me, and we can have a one-on-one discussion. And because one of the things we're always all about is helping people get better employment outcomes. It's as simple as that. Thank you, everyone.